Chapter 157 Murong Brothers. After Han Li left the Yue Lu Hall, he said goodbye to the two people in red and flew towards the 100 Medicine Garden with his magic tool. In the air, Han Li kept thinking about refining the Foundation Establishment pill, while looking down at the continuous hills with indifference. Suddenly, a loud, rumbling burst came from beneath and surprised him. He couldn't help but take a closer look, only to see lightning flickering on one of the hills, and there were some faint applause coming from there. It brought up Han Li's curiosity. He landed from his magic tool nearby and automatically started to get close to the source. Murong Brothers, another one, show us what you've got. That's right. This is the first time I saw the shape of lightning that closely. It's so frightening. As soon as he arrived at the top of the hill, Han Li heard a noise coming from the front, and the name Murong Brothers moved his heart. The genius brothers with thunder spiritual roots who just entered the sect, isn't their last name Murong? The loud burst from before, are these brothers, the focus of so much attention, demonstrating their skills? At this moment, he saw clearly that there were about 30 to 40 disciples of varying ages on a hilltop, huddled in a loose circle and pointing to two 11 or 12-year-old youngsters in the middle of the circle while talking excitingly. There were several charred pits within the circle. The edges of the pits were melted because of the high temperature, and they released light cyan blue smoke. After a breeze blew by, the burnt smell was everywhere. Seeing this scene, Han Li hastily went over and looked carefully at the youngsters. The two of them had delicate features, fair and tender skin, and they looked very similar. However, when they blinked their eyes, they looked like little elves. At this moment, because of the crowd's attention and praise, the two of them were blushing with excitement. After they looked at each other, they chanted a spell at the same time, and lightning flashed in the hands of the two, followed by two thin bolts of lightning flying out. They landed on the ground nearby with two loud bangs and a burst of bright, white light, creating two more pits in the ground. This is the Thunder Attribute's Thunder Palm? Regardless of its power or sound, this was more powerful than the Fireball technique, Icicle technique, or other magic techniques that are of the same level. Thunder Attribute magic techniques are indeed the most destructive magic techniques. Han Li was astonished and also envious of the brother's spiritual roots attribute. Obviously, Han Li wasn't the only one with this mentality. The other disciples who were watching them were also looking at the two with envious looks, while hating themselves for not being blessed by the heavens with this kind of high-grade attribute that made everyone jealous. The brothers demonstrated their thunder spell a few more times among the crowd of applause, but their strength were clearly starting to fall behind their will. After all, they were still too young. That's it? It seems the power of thunder spiritual roots is merely this. I say it's probably not even as good as my wind spiritual roots. Just then, a lousy man's voice sounded from the crowd across where Han Li stood, and the surrounding people couldn't help but look in that direction. A young man and woman were standing together side by side. The man was tall and handsome, and the woman was beautiful like a flower. They were obviously a pair of couple who were madly in love. That man looked proud, and seemed to be dismissive of the Murong brothers' thunder palm, and the woman was blushing because so many people were looking at her. Her reddish face was even more charming. Who is this man? He's so wild. Wind spiritual roots. Isn't that also a type of mutated spiritual roots? This man has mutated spiritual roots. I know this man. He is senior martial brother Lu, and he indeed has mutated spiritual roots. His wind spells can be very powerful. Even if he also has mutated spiritual roots, why is he saying things like this? Maybe it's out of jealousy. After all, back then among the low-level disciples, he was the only one who had mutated spiritual roots. But now, there are suddenly two more who are even more qualified than he is. Of course he would feel unbalanced. What? So narrow-minded. Hush. Be quiet, don't let him hear this. He's very vengeful. Being targeted by him would be very terrible. Because of the young man's appearance, everyone around were whispering together. It appeared that this person wasn't that popular around here. Humph. Little fellow, I will show you what real mutated spiritual roots are. The young man's face sank when he saw people discussing him like this. He walked into the circle and declared proudly, "The two of you, feel free to attack me with your thunder spells. If I dodge for even a half step, I will kowtow and admit my wrongs to you two little demons." Seeing Senior Marshal Brother Lu being so arrogant and looking down on them for no reason, the Murong brothers were so mad that their faces became pale. "You're not gonna dodge?" "Of course. And no magic tools allowed?" "Yes." The two brothers were indeed biological brothers. They each added a rule favoring them and finalized it. The young man was also arrogant, so he didn't even take the two brothers seriously and accepted their conditions without any objections. "Good, then us two brothers will take care of Senior Marshal Brother," the two teenagers said angrily in unison. "Senior Marshal Brother Lu, will you be okay like this?" The young man's female companion started to worry. What's there to worry about dealing with two kids? Marshal Sister Cheng can rest assured." The young man waved his hand indifferently and stood in front of the Murong brothers in an ostentatious manner. The two youngsters looked at each other, and suddenly came close together. They each held out their hand and took each other's hand, while the other finger pointed to the sky. Together, they chanted the same exact spell. Seeing this, the young man sneered, and casted a defensive spell onto himself. A cyan blue mask immediately surrounded him, and wrapped him tightly inside. Thunder Chain Strike. The biological brothers finally finished casting their spell, and they pointed their finger at the top of the young man's head. A dark cloud about the size of 10 meters appeared above him. A white light flashed in the cloud, and a lightning bolt as wide as a finger landed on the cyan blue shield. The lightning hit the shield so hard that the shield shook violently, and the young man's expression changed. Apparently the power of the lightning was out of his expectations. But this lightning shock was just the beginning. From the dark cloud that was floating in the air, more of the same lightning attack fell and hit the shield until it flickered and grew dark, on the edge of breaking apart. The young man's expression darkened again, as he suddenly made some complicated, dazzling finger gestures, growled deeply, and pressed his hands tightly against the light shield wall. The light mask suddenly glowed in blue. Not only was it repaired, but it also seemed to be even thicker than before. But the Murong brothers naturally wouldn't give up the advantages that they possessed, so they also sent a variety of spells up into the air and made the dark cloud expand until its diameter was about 10 meters. The falling lightning grew thicker and more frequent. Faced with the two brothers' fierce attack, the Senior Marshal Brother Lu was even more surprised and angry, and he didn't know what to do. He never expected them to grasp the elementary mid-grade Thunder Chain technique at such a young age. He was hit so hard he couldn't withdraw from the fight, and he could only cast counterattack spells. He suffered at such a disadvantage in front of so many people. Just like that, the youngsters on one side were using all their strengths to support the Dark Cloud's lightning attack, and on the other side, the young man was struggling to keep casting defensive spells to reinforce the cyan blue shield. This competition turned into an unexpected tug of war. Normally, if one side attacked and the other defended, the attacker would naturally have a greater advantage, and they could save a lot more magic than the defender. However, the Murong brothers who were attacking had already used up a lot of magic power during the demonstrations just now, and they didn't have enough magic power from the beginning. Also, the young man surnamed Lu was a lot older after all, so the maturity of his magic power couldn't be compared to those that had just entered the sect like them. By fighting a battle of attrition, they had their backs against a wall. Under everyone's sight, that dark cloud released the last few bolts of lightning and then dispersed, leaving a clear sky. Depleted of magic power, the youngsters were forced to first stop the lightning.